Yep. We are live now, Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Hello all, welcome back to Automation Squad. In this session, we'll discuss about database activities and how we interact with UiPath to the database activities, how we enter the data to database, and how we retrieve data and then save it into an Excel file, all those actions. So these are the quick points that we are going to discuss today. What will be the package which we are using from UiPath to interact with database? What are the activities we have inside the package database activities? How do we, what is connection string, and how do we create a connection string? And here today we use SQL Server as a database, and then we interact with SQL Server. And how do we, as I said, how do we connect with that SQL Server with connection string, and what are the providers we have, and each activity and different ways of which we can use that activities, and how actually we retrieve the data and then save it back to our local folder, and one important use case in the end. These are all the contents which we are going to discuss today. So quickly, the package which we are using is UiPath.database activities. This you can download from manage packages. I'll show that in while we are doing the practical. And we have these activities in database. First one is to connect. This is used to connect to database by using a standard connection string. I'll explain what are these, and then I'll just show you the example how we use these activities in UiPath. So next one, firstly the connect activity, we have to provide the provider name, and then we have to provide the connection string, and then that will give you the output as a database connection. So that database connection can be used to all other activities to interact with the database. And then disconnect, so opposite to connect, you can just after using all the activities, after dealing with the database, you just have to disconnect from the database to clear the cache. So that is quick use case for I mean quick usage of disconnect. And then next, execute non-query. So there are two types of executes, execute non-query and then execute query. Execute non-query is used for the activities like insert, update. So whatever the activities which interacts with the database and then changes the database, so those are used in uh, those are those crude operations can be done using execute non-query activity. So few of the operations that can be done on query are update, insert, delete, and then it returns the number of affected rows. If there are for any, like for all other types, it will just the return type will be just -1. So if it is adding something, for example, if you are using an insert query inside execute non-query, then it will return the affected number of rows. Same goes with update, same goes with delete. So this also uses the existing connection which is we create using the connect activity. And then next, execute query. Execute query, here simply we use select statements. So if your agenda is to just retrieve the data from database, and then you just have to save it in the form of an Excel, then simply use execute query activity. I'll show that. Execute query activity, and then insert your query in that, and then it will retrieve the data in the form of a data table. You just write the data table into an Excel. So that is with execute query. And then insert option is used to insert a bulk number of rows. For example, you have to read entire Excel, and then you have to insert that entire Excel which has been converted into a data table. If you have to insert that data table into a database, you directly use insert activity. You provide the data table name, and then that will directly insert all the rows to the database. So the start transaction is just like an Excel application scope. Just compare the activity start transaction activity with Excel application scope. So like all the activities which all these activities, execute query, execute non-query, insert. If you are using more number of these activities repeatedly, instead of using it separately, you can just keep all these activities under start transaction, and then this start transaction will treat that as a single transaction. So from starting to end, it will treat it as a single transaction. So that will be a little bit speed compared to individual activities. So that is what start transaction mean. So we'll just quickly go to UiPath. So as I told you, firstly we install the package. So the package name path.database.activities. This one I've already installed it. Just install and click on save. These are the activities which we have. So firstly we have to create the connection. So let's drag it and then click on configure connection wizard, and then here we are using Microsoft SQL Server. So just click on Microsoft SQL Server and then select SQL Server. Don't select OLEDB, it is a different provider, and this this connection string is different than this. So in our case we are using SQL Server, so just click on SQL Server and then check this option, click on OK. So now we have to select the server name. So for this server name you have to install SQL Server, so that you can find in microsoft.com. I've already installed it. So after you install, it will look like this. Yeah, server management, I've opened it already. So once you open this, you will have a server name and then authentication type. So firstly select database engine. So these are different other services which we have for SQL Server. Since we are dealing with this database, select database engine. This will be your server name. Select Windows authentication. You can also select server authentication if the credentials are if you are storing the credentials in orchestrator and then using those credentials, if you have to interact with database, select SQL server authentication. So now I'm using Windows authentication. If you use Windows, this will be disabled, and if you use SQL server, this will be activated. So I'm just using Windows authentication. So from here we just need the server name. Paste it here. I've already opened it, so I'm just closing it. So I already have this. So just paste the server name. So I'm using Windows authentication, the same as which we used in SQL server. You'll get all the databases which are available in this server. I'm using AdventureWorks and click on test connection. So then a message will be pop up like this. If your connection is successful, then you will get this message. Click on OK. I'm clicking on cancel because I've already done that. So in this activity, so here if you see, this will be the database if you 1 second, I'll just click on. So that connection string which I've showed you, that will automatically be created by the activity itself. You don't have to create anything. You select the database and click on OK. So if you see here, this will automatically be created. So this one. So here, so this connection string has been divided. I'll just explain the parts which divided parts. So up to here, the data source. So this will be your server name. So this will be your server name. And the next part will be your database name. So I've selected, if you remember, I selected AdventureWorks. So that will be here, initial catalog. And final will be the authentication type. So if you are using Windows authentication, you can, the string looks like this. And if you are using Windows authentication, SQL Server authentication, it will look like, in place of integrated security, there you'll have your username and password. This you don't have to type. If you just select SQL Server in that before in window, these will automatically be popped up. Semicolon and then password, and enter your password. So this will be your connection string in case if you are using SQL Server authentication. So here in my example I'm showing Windows authentication itself, so I'll keep it like this. Okay, so that's with connect. So next we will see execute query. So firstly I'll show you the database. Here I'm using, so as I shown you earlier, I'm using AdventureWorks, and inside that I have few tables. I've created one table called test. So this is the schema of the data table. This is the structure of that. So firstly we uh, just run that whatever we have that inside that data table. So I'm just running the select query. So currently we have these two rows. So using execute query, we can run that select query inside our execute query activity, and then you can retrieve these all these rows into a data table, and then that can be written into a Excel file. So just drag and drop and execute query, so which I already did. So here inside the connect, you create your connection string variable, database connection. So that will be type of database connection. So this variable will be used in all remaining activities. So this is the execute query activity, and then I've pasted the connection. Since I'm using the existing connection, I've pasted that string already here. So this variable, and then the query. So the same query which I used here. You can test using this SQL Server Management. You'll have the result, and then you can just copy the same query, and then you can paste it within the double quotes, and then that will work. So after this activity got executed, I'll get an output in the form of data table. So I've written that output into a data table variable, so which is a data table variable, and then that data table, using a write range, I'm writing that data table into my project folder itself. So this is the Excel file. I'll delete that, and then we can run the bot. Since it is a select statement, so there are no queries there are no rows which are going to affect to that existing data table. So I'm getting affected rows as a 0 count. Click on OK, and if you see, it already returned the data table into an Excel file. Stop on that. So these are the two rows which are there in our SQL management server. So that's how you do the select statement. If required, you can edit the select query as per your requirement. So if you have a query, if you have a condition like where salary greater than, or just keep it as less than 3,000. Let's see if it is running. So it is running. It is giving one row for us. So just copy this entire query, go back to UiPath, click on edit query, inside the double quotes paste that query, and then click on OK. So here we already have the Excel, just delete that old one and then run again. Open the Excel file. There you go. It just written the single row. So that's how we insert the where condition, and these where conditions can be, in real world scenarios, this SQL query itself will be a very long statement. So in that, there you might face a issue, like for example, the if you have to select the rows from particular date to date, like start date and then end date. So here you directly, to test, you directly keep the date like that. Start date equal to this, and then end date equal to something else. So and then if you this has to be changing, this has to change in every run. So for example, if this week the start date will be from 1.21, and then if it is running in next week and that changes, so for in that cases you just have to edit the query. Like you can just include your variables inside the query itself. So for example, here I'm using this 3,000. In place of this, if I have to use a variable, just keep two single quotes, and then two double quotes again, and then two plus, and then here you can include your variable. string. So this is how you include your variables inside the query. Just closing that. So that's what execute query is. And then next we have execute non-query. So here we just retrieved the data, we didn't change anything inside the database. So in non-query we change the database. So this is the first example, a simple query statement, I mean simple insert into statement. So I've just hard coded the values as well. So this is the first type, and then I kept the existing connection string, and then I'm getting the result in the form of affected rows variable. So in real world situations, you might get a chance like if this query is really ran or not. So in that case, you can use this affected records variable, and then you can check if it is greater than 0. So if it is greater than 0, then something got inserted into your database. So in that like that, you can verify whether if the query statement executed or not. So this is our query. In the place of company name, you should see Krishna 2 and then the salary. So I've connected this. 1 second. Let's connect this activity, and then execute non-query. Okay, that's running the database. Okay, so since I've inserted only a single row, the affected rows are 1. And let's see if it ran or not. Yeah, so if you see, Krishna 2 has been inserted. So this is one type of execute non-query which is directly hard coding the values, and this is not recommended actually. So we use the scenario with which we have to pass the variables to the query. So I've created 2 variables, company name and then salary. So here I've hard coded. This can be from any if this can be from a for each loop, or this can be from an Excel file, which is basically your config file, anything. So here I have 2 variables, I have 2 values assigned to that, and this will be mk. I'll just change it to mk underscore test and 20,000. So to insert your variables, as I told already, you just have to edit the query. So you'll have a query like this. Just show you again. Just paste your query in double quotes, removing everything, and then insert to single quotes, to double quotes, to plus symbols, and then your variable. Same goes to the other variable as well. So like this, you can insert your variables. There is other way as well, which you can by which you can use your activities collection. So that I'll show you in the next example. So here we have these 2 variables, and we have execute non-query with variables. So this first type is without variables, which I've hard coded the query, and the second type is to have the variables as a parameters. So I'm running this as well. Since I've inserted 1 row, the affected rows are 1. Just do the select, and the mk test got inserted. So this is how you insert the variables. And as I told you, there is another way which you can use the parameter list of the activity itself. You don't have to create you don't have to add your variables inside these query like this. You can directly insert the variables in different way, which I show you here. This one, execute non-query. I'll just connect that. So just have to click on collections, and then you have to keep the arguments. So I'm inserting as I already shown you. These are the variables which I'm inserting. So the other way is to have them in a collection. So click on collection. This name can be anything. So these will be your variables, and these names should be inserted inside the query. With an at the rate of symbol, you can directly insert your variable name. Argument name. This argument name should match with the collection argument name. So this name. these two should match. These can be your variable. So this is other way of inserting the rows. Just running the bot. 1 second, I'll just change the variables values. Type, so I'm keeping 3 and then 25,000. Click on execute. So yeah, single row got affected. And quickly check the database. If you see, this is got inserted here. So that's how you insert. These are the three types of execute non-queries. So inside these non-queries, here I'm showing only insert command. You can use update and then delete as well. You have to be very careful when we are using delete command, because that might directly delete all the rows inside the database. I would suggest use any other precautionary conditions before executing the delete. So these are the three non-queries, and then we discussed about the insert, execute query, and then execute non-query, and the next activity is to use disconnect. So since you complete, after you complete all your database activities, you just have to disconnect the database. So just directly use the disconnect activity and then just mention the string which you already created in the connect activity, and then that will automatically disconnect the session. So yeah, these are the few activities, and as I told you, the use case which I'm about to say is with the config file. So in our cases, mainly we use even in the case of RE framework, we use the config file as in the form of an Excel. So now you can directly insert that Excel into your database, and then from database you can call from the database you can retrieve that rows, and then you can use those rows in the form of a config file. So that is one of the main and important use case using the database. And all remaining activities like retrieving the data, retrieving the bulk data, any things you can do with the database using these connection activities. Yeah, that's all.
Krishna, we got a question from Prasad.
Mhm.
Do we need to install SQL Server in local machine?
Yes, you have to. So in this case, I'm using SQL Server Management. So you have to definitely install the SQL Server Management. You can find that in Microsoft. So in real world situations, you can we don't have to do that. Concerned teams will do that, and they will give you a connection string which looks like this, and you directly have to paste that connection string in the connect activity, and then you can check whether the connection is established or not. And one more thing is with this query, even we don't have to write these queries will be given by business guys itself. You just have to edit the variable section, for example, which I told already, the date section. You have to you have to make that date as a variable, and then you have to insert that from UiPath. Yep.
Thank you so much, Krishna.